Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, broadcasting live every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Central from Panama City Beach, Florida, home of the world's most beautiful beaches. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining me on my weekly broadcast. Every week, I'll feature some of the best instructors, coaches, authors, and entrepreneurs in the golf business today. I begin with a great discussion on Coach's Corner, followed by an insightful interview with my special guest. So let's get started by introducing tonight's Coach's Corner panel. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. I'm very excited. I've got a great show tonight. We're going to be starting off, as always, with Coach's Corner, and I will introduce the gang, if you will, in just a moment. And then a little bit later on in my broadcast, I'm going to be joined by a very special guest. He's going to be phoning in a little late on his time, or early, I guess, depending on how you look at it, from the UK. His name is John Taylor, and he's a performance mind coach and a NLP master practitioner, and I'll explain to you a little bit later on what that is. He'll be joining me on the second half. He's very, very excited and has been speaking quite a bit about it on social media over the last few days. So I'm really interested in having him in, and I appreciate that he's going to be calling in the wee hours, if you will, from the UK. So a quick couple of announcements. First off, Golf Talk Live is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. iGolf Sports Network is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing top quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, offering insightful reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top PGA and LPGA teacher professionals, all designed to help improve your game from tee to green. And just wanted to share a quick announcement on that. The July-August issue will be available on newsstands June 16th. So I'm really, really excited about that. I'm not going to give you too much information about it. I want you to be surprised. It's a very interesting gentleman who is on the cover. Very, very excited to put him on there. He was somebody that I grew up watching over the years, so I'll kind of give you a little bit of a clue of his age. If you want to subscribe to Golf Tips, go to golftipsmag.com and just click on subscribe, and you can get both the print version and or the digital version, or both if you want. But anyways, go to golftipsmag.com, and subscribers will be receiving their copy about a week or so early. It's on its way through the print system right now, so it should be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. And then, as I said, June 16th, it'll hit newsstands across the U.S. and Canada. All right, I've got three great guests joining me on the Coach's Corner panel tonight. First up is Pete Buchanan. He is founder and director of instruction and owner of Plain Simple Golf LLC. Plain Simple Golf houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. Pete's been teaching for the past 30-plus years and has become one of the favorites here on the panel. Also, another favorite is Peter Egazarian, owner and director of performance for Northeast Performance Institute and owner and president of Northeast Golf Performance. He was also the recipient of the 2017 Northeastern New York PGA Player Development Award, and he's also a TrackMan Master and a Proponent Group member. And then rounding up the panel is another friend. In fact, all three of them are. Jamie Leno-Zimron. She's an instructor, body worker, and consultant. She's also an Aikido 6th-degree black belt, Class A LPGA teacher professional, a corporate and conference speaker, executive trainer and coach, and a speaker for Vistage International and the Executive Committee of Canada. So, gang, welcome to Coach's Corner.
Thanks, Ted. Good to be here.
Yeah,
thanks,
Ted. Great to be here.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate it. And thank you, as always, for giving of your time. All right, we're going to talk about tonight, as I was alluding to a little bit off air. You know, many of us have been kind of cooped in for the last few months dealing with this pandemic, and some have had the fortunate abilities to get out there and work on their game, and well, many of us have not. So confidence becomes an issue. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we can do to help build your confidence, how we can help you as coaches and teacher professionals, and what you can do on your own. So, Pete, I'm going to do this just to simplify it. Pete Buchanan, I will address you as Pete, and Peter Egazarian, of course, I will address you as Peter. just to keep it straight. But Pete, as in Buchanan, I'm going to start with you. Is the question I have for you is your confidence proactive or reactive? And this is not necessarily a given one way or the other, but just to give you an example, many great athletes are proactive with their confidence. So as an example, back a little while ago, Jordan Spieth was walking to the first tee at Augusta before the final round, and you can be assured he was reminding himself that he was playing great in 2015. He had built the foundation since he was 12 years old to handle a lead at the Masters on Sunday. So proactive confidence is a decision that you will be sustainably confident from all the great positive experience you've had and in the past, and take that forward. So give us an example, if you wouldn't mind, Pete, when you're dealing with somebody that's more reactive as opposed to proactive. I've given you an example of proactive, but more of a reactive confidence. Give us an idea of that, and what's kind of the general difference between the two, do you think?
That's a great question, Ted. Reactive-wise, I can give you one just from yesterday evening, having a lesson with it was a second lesson with a new player in reactive confidence in the fact that this player does not want to hit the ground because they're sort of afraid of what it might do to them. So it was building enough swings to know that they're not going to hit the ground because we're repeating it over and over again. So it's a reaction to what they're seeing and feeling in the swing to gain the confidence that they're not going to run into the ground as they thought they might, and be able to swing properly and just, hit it right off of there, versus somebody who, as you said with Spieth, who's been doing it and has the performance behind them. And so they know, proactively, I should say, or you said too, that the confidence is there because they've done it before. So, I would say the reactive and proactive sort of run together. I mean, you sort of have to have some reactions to know that it's going to be working, which will build your confidence so that down the road, proactively you have it. So I think they sort of run hand in hand for a little bit, depending on what level of player that you actually are.
Well said. And you're exactly right. A lot of I think what happens with a lot of our golfers out there is, especially when they haven't been playing for a while, and this is really one of the reasons why I want to have this discussion tonight, because we're in that situation right now where there are many people that haven't had the opportunities to get out there and work on their game outside of what they may be doing in and out, outside of their own home. So their confidence level is going to be down. And in that particular case, Jamie, this sort of goes to the next question, and this is a familiar sound, is I've lost my confidence. So they haven't been out there hitting balls in the practice tee, and they haven't been out there playing rounds, and suddenly they don't have the same confidence that maybe they finished last season with. So this is something that happens, obviously, to everybody, and we're going to get into some more specific things about how to build that confidence back up. But this is something that you, I'm sure, have heard on the lesson tee many, many times. They'll say, I'm just not confident with this shot, or I'm just not confident, in this particular scenario when you take them out for a playing lesson. What's the first thing that you try to do or try to instill in them to help them understand and work through that process?
I think the very first thing is to be patient, be understanding and patient with yourself. I think we have to be realistic, and everybody's in a certain sense in the same boat because, most everybody really hasn't been out. There are some places where people have been able to play to some extent even throughout the COVID lockdown, but, relatively few. So that's one thing. Most everybody's in the same boat, so be nice to yourself about it. Give yourself a little time. Imagine the tour players, how they must feel. They're probably rusty as well. And even if they've been playing, they're rusty from being in the intensity of tournament conditions. So I think we're all going to be, in a sense, rusty. Or, you need to be out there. You need to swing. You need to play to that's part of building confidence or having confidence. It's just that you've been doing it. You've done it. You've been doing it. When we come out and we haven't been doing it for quite a while, I think that we just have to really give ourselves time. And you use the exact right word there, Ted, which is process, which I love from Canada.
Yeah.
It really is a process of of getting back. And it doesn't have to be a long one or a painful one. I think everybody's going to be so excited to get back out there. And there's, especially for golfers who've been golfing for a long time, it's going to be like riding a bike, you get back on the bike, make a few swings, play a few rounds, and, pretty soon you start to find your groove again. And and we can talk a little bit more probably later on. I think that the fitness aspect of it's going to be important because our bodies have to be ready and stretched and into the use of our golf muscles and things like that. But, for the most part, I think it's just, give yourself a little time to get back out there. And the biggest thing is to enjoy it. I think everybody's going to be so happy just to be out there that's more important than even exactly how well you do, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, well said. And, we're going to get into some of that here in just a little bit. Peter, I want to sort of follow up from that. We obviously come across golfers at any time, but particularly now we're going to come across more who haven't been out for a while. Some of it could be due to where their proximity in the country, if they're from the Northeast or even the Northwest, where it tends to be a little chillier for many months. They normally wouldn't get out until a little bit later than the rest of them. And obviously their confidence is going to be down. And maybe last year they were their short game, both on and off the green was real tight, and they were confident with that. But again, many months have passed, and then a few more months have been added on with what's been dealing. Is this a time as a coach, do you think, where rather than just coming out of the gate and off of what they were doing last year, is coming back and sort of refocusing on some of the basics? Let's go back and talk about some of the basics of the golf swing and some of the fundamentals, and sort of not really start over, but just a refresher course, if you will, just to get them used to doing things correctly when they're coming out for the first time this year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're looking at playing well and performing well, confidence is an incredibly important aspect of it, and it comes from seeing positive outcomes and believing in what you're doing. That's kind of the definition of confidence, is this overall belief and trust that your capacity to execute whatever you might be doing in golf and life is going to be, done well and have an outcome that is in line with your expectations. And I think you make a very good point that, I am in New England and the Northeast of the United States, and we're spending a lot of time right now getting back to, if it's somebody that I've been coaching for a little while, or getting back to a baseline that we understood and understand, or if I'm beginning to coach someone, it's, something as fundamental as how do you make just solid contact again? Like, what does it mean? Get familiar with holding the club again. In our area, there's a lot of people that are, because golf is, one of the few sports that people can engage with right now. Maybe they're getting back to playing golf, or going to try it again, or maybe thinking about trying to start. So it's it's a great question you're asking. It's very much dependent on confidence, and the ability to execute is directly intertwined with that. But as coaches, I think it's very important that we get back to that one basic, fundamental, important thing of playing well is quality of contact and the ability to feel comfortable for what you're doing and move forward from there.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point, Peter. Thank you for that. And that is, we've had for, golfers that have played for 10, 20, 30 years, they go through the same process every season. They, especially up in your neck of the woods where they're in the Northeast, and, they might have 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6 months, depending on how harsh some of the winters are, before they can really get out there and work on their game. So they're kind of used to that. They're used to, okay, well, I played a great season. I got out quite a few times, and by the end of the season, boy, I was really hitting it solid and playing some great golf. But now, I'm gonna sit back. Maybe I'm gonna watch some hockey through the season or whatever, or in the fall some football, and I'm not going to be able to get out and play as much as I'd like. So they've got to kind of retrain themselves, I think, a little bit. And so the question now becomes, Pete, I'm going to go to you. And that is, how do we build a golfer's confidence? So we talked about that the fact that there's different types of confidence. There's those that are very proactive based on past experiences, and then there's those that are sort of reactive to what they might be working on now. So there's a couple of key points that we're going to touch on. I'm going to have each of you address a couple in particular. The first one, Pete, for you is preparation. The old saying, build it and it will come, is really a secure feeling on the first tee that you know how to put the work and effort in each part of your game to deal with the shots you'll need on the course. So preparation is key. Talk about some of the things that you're going to start the folks early off this season, again, because we've had some extra time where they haven't been able to get out and play. What are you going to do extra, if anything, in helping them prepare to get ready to get out and enjoy the summer?
Well, another great question, Ted. You know, for a lot of my folks, we've been fortunate enough to be working online through a lot of this, and I've been giving them drills to do at home, some of the parts of some of the instruction they can do. They don't need a ball, they can do it. You know, just making some certain motions that I'm having them work on, whether it's just the address, the initial setup, posture, and things that are going to get them set to play. Some of them have had the ability to hit, so we've been going full force. But I think more than anything else, I simply have a program where I develop the practice routines that it really is all about preparation. And so they're always working and prepping themselves toward the goal of what they're trying to do. So I think at the beginning, it's taking the simple goals at the start of getting them in the right address position, making sure they're taking the time to get themselves set up, to understand what they need to do, and then, you know, slowly building into the swings that they're going to be moving into in the you know, the practice routines are going to be moving into, but making sure that they each one fundamentally have a process that they're going to go through and that they stick with, especially now since it's a little bit later for some of them getting started. And so that they understand that how they go through those practice processes and how they set themselves up will speed them along to playing a little bit better, a little bit faster, since they're a little bit out of time. You know, some of them would have been playing quite a bit already. So I think it's just getting them to understand where they need to go, but the process that's going to take them there, and not doing any shortcuts and not trying to shortcut it because there's less time. You still have to go through the routines that you have. You still have to understand what you're trying to do. And I've been assisting them all in getting in practice programs where I you know, a lot of them will come to me and we go through the practice that they're supposed to do. I help them through it so they can understand the process of, you know, we're doing this because it feeds here, and these are the reasons why we're doing these certain things. So I think it's just getting them prepared and ready to play and go from there.
Yeah, well said. And I think the key thing is you have to have a plan, you know, and obviously you want to keep it as simple as possible. You know, I always find it interesting, and I'm sure the three of you would probably certainly agree on some level, but, you know, virtually in every aspect of our lives, whether it be our day-to-day jobs, and I'm going to exclude us for a second in this case because we all do essentially the same thing, but, you know, we go out and we have a plan on how we're going to execute whatever that plan may be, and we prepare for it. We don't just go out there. I mean, obviously, as we get more and more developed and seasoned in our craft, things become easier and become second nature. But initially, we go out, or, you know, when we were in school, we prepared for a test. What always baffles me is that people don't seem to apply the same methodology when it comes to their golf game. You know, you'll see CEOs who will spend weeks and months in some case planning for a merger or acquisition and to every, you know, to the minute details. But yet in their golf game, they'll zip up 5 minutes before their round, they'll pull their clubs out and jump to the first tee without hitting a single warm-up shot, and then they wonder why they can't break 100. So it just, you know, preparation goes in. And this is where, Jamie, I'm going to come to you, and again, we're going to touch on this being proactive and allowing all the great experiences that you've had in the game to be able be put forth as your foundation of confidence, and decide that temporary low points in your game will pass quickly and will not have any impact on your foundation. So again, we want to be proactive in our efforts in order to see results. Talk about that. How can we encourage people to be proactive in getting out there and then building those different you know, sessions, if you will, to gain some confidence?
I think that you're absolutely right about a plan, and I think personally the best plan is to ease into it and to do it this way. But so the overall kind of idea is, ease in a sense, and it's kind of like take at least the first week or weeks as sort of a giant warm up, shall we say? And what I mean by that is, first of all, you got to get your golf muscles warmed up and toned. And even if you've been doing fitness, which I hope people have during this time, or in the off season or the COVID season, there's certain golf muscles that need to be activated and hooked up, reconnected. And I think the best way to do that is to practice short shots. And first of all, to do some fitness exercises. I have something called Make Your Golf Club Your Health Club. Using your golf club to do golf warm-ups and strengthen and stretch all the golf muscles and related to the golf swing. But whatever, kind of golf fitness a person does, I think that's important. And then to hit a lot of short shots. And what I mean is, wedge shots. The short swing is a wonderful thing to practice because it's really the sort of micro core of the full swing. And what I mean is that, getting a sequence of movement from the lower to the upper body, getting connected movement, making solid centered contact, being sure that your fundamentals of your posture grip alignment are good, getting your tempo set, balancing out the swing. And so all of these kinds of fundamentals you can set and practice on short shots. And the nice thing about short shots is you can practice them if you have a backyard, or you can just go to a park. You can take real golf balls, you can take wiffle balls or rubber balls so that it's safe. And I like to set up hula hoops, for example, as little greens or little targets. So, you can make it fun. And you don't really need a golf course, and it's a nice practice that you can do yourself. So the plan is to warm up at home, or in the park, whatever, not necessarily at the golf course, but just kind of get your golf muscles, your golf swing, your tempo, the core, the micro core of your swing going in a really nice way, making solid contact, getting the ball up in the air, working on some distance control, things like that. So that's sort of the plan, because that micro, you just add, put in the top of your backswing and the full follow through, and then you're back to your full swings. So practice is so important, and being able to practice, in a sense, on a daily basis or every other day. You can't just sort of go out cold like you were talking about, CO, whoever it is. A lot of us do that, right? We get to the golf course 5 minutes before you're on the tee. And in general, I think it's really a good idea to be kind of grooving in your swing and having your golf muscles strong and flexible for your golf swing. You don't get injured. You perform better. So that's sort of the plan, and being really proactive about that, because then you can take that to the driving range and the golf course and really kind of get yourself back up to speed in a good way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, as I said at the top of that question, we get a lot of our folks that just they do the complete opposite. They don't prepare, they don't plan. And, this is where we have to step in and help them to create a plan, and more importantly, encourage them. I mean, we certainly can't force anybody, but encourage them to stick with that plan, because they're not going to see improvement otherwise. And another aspect, Peter, that I want you to touch on, and that is when it comes to players' understanding of their game and understanding what their strengths are, what their limitations are, and what their triggers are. Understanding those very, very well, and what their current abilities are. That doesn't mean there isn't always going to be room for improvement, but understanding where their game is at now, because there is only now. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's only now. So understanding their strengths and limitations, and what areas that they can, pull together to help build that confidence. Touch on that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, helping a player understand and finding out, how do they find what their strengths are? How do you determine that while working with your students, and what their limitations are?
It comes from, past instances, tapping into, what they've done in life. Something that in golf is something relatable to real life for them. especially in the beginning, even in other points of development, it's so much more important to relate back to real. But as far as weaknesses go, I think it's important to understand them. But personally, I just don't. I don't spend a whole lot of time on that. As we're talking about their physicality, addressing, their funk movement and and that type of activity. We definitely spend time working to address those, but it's something that we, really give them the self-awareness of, but we try to really reinforce the strengths to their game that we really emphasize on, those aspects while we're addressing some of the points that need to be developed. And just most importantly, we're looking at, what they already have, they do well, as long as they're a regular golfer. A regular golfer is someone that plays golf on a regular basis. And if they're not a beginner, already do have the capacity to hit good shots, and there's not often so why they're already hitting good shots. So we try to really embrace that as a big strength and put some context around it. And that can really help them to gain confidence. Just understanding why that amazing shot they want to repeat over and over, flying away from them, and having that be the plan, trying a bunch of different things.
Right, exactly. And I think having sort of a benchmark, if you will, to work from, I think can add to not only their strengths, but gives them an idea of and that you can put together an effective plan from there, and understanding. And I think drawing out those strengths is something, Pete, that, and I'm going back to Pete Buchanan here, comes with great coaching. That's important as well when it comes to confidence, is being matched with the right coach for you. This is something that, there's obviously, there are a lot of great coaches and a lot of great teacher professionals out there, but one might not be as effective for you, let's say if you were the student, as somebody else would. So talk about that. What's important when you're working with your students? I know that you've had, as we all have had, some tremendous success, but sometimes it just does not mesh. Talk about the importance of having that good relationship between coach and student.
Well, it's definitely a big part of it, being able to put your students at ease when they come in. One of the first things I always like to do is I like to find out how their day's been. I don't even talk golf when they first come up. How you doing? How's the family? How are the kids? What's going on? How was your day? How was work? Everything going along okay? Just to try to get them settled into, moving into starting to work on their game, and, just trying to figure out where they are. I think I told you that story before. I had a gentleman that came up for a lesson, and we talked about 5 minutes, and I said, let's go get a beer. We're not doing this today. Because he had a day that I knew we wasn't going to work. So we just went, sat, and had a beer and talked golf. So we didn't even hit any balls. And he said that was one of the best things I ever did. But you just have to be able to understand your people a little bit, know what they're all about. Ask questions. I ask a ton of questions. And my dad used to always call it the test, the question test. Every time somebody said something, he'd answer them with a question. And so you can always get out a lot of information. And just to put them at ease, and, like you said, they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses, and we have to address both. But you also have to get them to understand how to play to their strengths, because it's going to help them score better on the golf course, and understanding what those are. And not necessarily avoiding weaknesses, but if you have some in your game and in the course of a round, you can play shots that will help you avoid some of that, then that becomes a strength. When I played competitively, pitching was never one of my best parts of the game, so I just avoided it. I made sure I didn't hit it anywhere where I had to pitch it. So, I knew how to do it. It just wasn't the strongest part of my game. So you can get to understand with them what their strengths are, how to really get them to come out while they're playing in the round. And I think that's really going to go a long ways to making that happen. And sometimes, as you said, you get some personalities that clash. Hopefully we don't have very many of those. I think over 36 years, I might have had maybe 2 or 3. I think it's, I was taught how to teach people. And so I just haven't had very many over the years. But it does happen, and I think the great coaches need to understand that as well. And sometimes you just have to part ways and say, hey, this isn't going to work. But, you do your best to try to put them at ease, try to get them to be relaxed. And I think the better they are that understanding, and having a good time while they're having the lesson. I always want them to have a good time. We don't want to make it, too much of work, even though some of it is. I said when they're on their own practicing, that's work. But when they're there with me, I like them to enjoy what they're doing, have some fun. It helps to build some more confidence and just get them to understand and, really what they're trying to do. But also, and me, I just try to keep it as simple as possible. And I think over the years that's really helped me more than anything else is the longer I teach, the less I say. And so it's really become a strong point over the years, to figure out how to simply put the message across so you don't have to say very much and keep them at ease and keep them, moving down the road toward where they want to get to.
Right. And I think it also goes to, for coaches, I think we have to first and foremost be really good listeners. We have to listen to our students, and that becomes, I think, a big factor for a lot of students and some of the difficulties they may have with coaching. I think too often, and we're all, in some levels, we're all guilty to it to a certain point. We have our own methodology in some cases. Maybe we have our own ideas of what we want to, impress or get across, and it may not necessarily be a good fit for that student. So we have to really listen to their needs and make an assessment based on what it is that they want, what they're trying to accomplish. And Cindy Miller, who I've become friends with over the years, co-hosting with her on the Women of Golf show, always says the first question she asks is why, and that is why do you want to play golf? Is it something that you're wanting to play competitive golf, at a more professional level or even at a collegiate level when she's dealing with some of her juniors, or are you just wanting to go out and maybe play with a spouse or with a group of friends? So understanding that why first, gives you a better understanding as a coach, I think, when you understand why the person's there to begin with. Obviously, they're there to learn the game, but, depending on what level they're looking to play, is going to dictate how you're going to teach them. If they just want to get the basics and they just want to get out there and have some fun and they don't care whether they're, necessarily breaking 100 every week, but they just want to be able to go out and feel confident going around the golf course, that may be one approach. And if they want to be a little bit more assertive, a little bit more proactive, as we've said tonight, then we're going to take maybe a slightly different approach. So those are some things that I think we want our students to think about, is getting matched up with the right person that you're going to be working with, because you're going to be working with them for a little while anyways, depending on your needs, and you want to make sure that there's a good relationship there. So well said, Pete. Jamie, the other thing too, I think that is very, very important that we want to encourage and help our students, and that is to create a positive and supportive internal voice. Your own voice should be the most important, supportive and creative, positive internal environment, and a negative voice can erode confidence in your abilities and create doubt in your capabilities as well. So talk about that. This is something that we have to work with our students in getting them to not just perform the various tasks that we may have, but having a positive internal dialogue. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh, I so love that you are thinking about that, asking that question, and I'm grateful that I got that question. And I love the last, all the wisdom in the last answer. So this is just really great. Ted, and everybody, I will never forget a book I read. I love the whole book, but the title was perfect. And the title said, what are you saying when you talk to yourself? So,
right.
It's all about self-talk. So that internal dialogue is our self-talk. And, kind of in a sense, only we hear it. And it is the ways we talk to ourselves on the golf course, sometimes just laying in bed at night. It's so important that voice, that self-talk is positive, is encouraging, builds you up. You need to build yourself up from inside, not tear yourself down. Sometimes if you think about it externally, a teacher or a parent to a young child, and in a sense we're all young children. It doesn't matter how old we are when we're learning. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we're kind of tender. Our confidence and our self-esteem is definitely at stake. We're kind of judging ourselves all the time. And having a really harsh taskmaster, the old, you know, kind of whip them and beat them into shape, or say, you know, God, that was terrible, you better blah, 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 it doesn't really elicit the best response. We do better when we have encouragement, we have praise, we have patience, we have the ability to do trial and error, to try this out and maybe not be very good the first time or the first few times, and, you know, just have a learning process. Again, this word process is such a big one. Things don't just happen, you know, just like that. It's a process all the time. So we need to talk to ourselves in like our favorite best teacher or our parent when they're the most encouraging and helpful to us. And that doesn't mean that, you know, we don't notice, say, a fault or a mistake or something that's a weakness or we need to work on. But we do that in a way that's in the context of supportive, of building up, of having room to learn. So this sort of positive mental attitude needs to be something inside. You know, our inner critic is not the one that's going to help us build our confidence and start to play and be our best. There's another interesting facet to this, and that is, I don't know if you know some of the studies on water, that water, and I bring that up because like 60-70% of our bodies and our brains are made of water. And there was a Japanese doctor, Dr. Emoto, it's very famous, where he took pictures of water, for example, in Lake Erie when it was polluted, and then he got pictures of the crystalline structure of that water. And the polluted negative water was very ugly crystalline structures, and then really fresh mountain streams had gorgeous crystalline structures at a molecular level. Well, there was some studies done where words were written on a bottle of water, and I mean even a plastic bottle of water, so really positive words, you know, you're great, you can do it, excellent, good job, keep going, that love, all those sorts of positive words, and then negative words, you know, hate, ugly, terrible, bad, no good, and just words written and taped on a bottle. And then they looked at the crystalline structure of those bottles of water, and the negative words it caused that water to get kind of ugly crystalline structures at a molecular level. And the opposite was true for the positive words. Those molecules were beautiful crystals. So I've taken that into and applied it kind of as a, you know, psychologist here, or holistic psychology and positive psychology to our inner self-talk, our inner game, and considering the fact that we are 60 to 70% water inside. So our self-talk we're really affecting ourselves at that cellular and even molecular level, and then that translates into how well our body-brain system, nervous system, neuromuscular system starts to fire when we are making swings. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff you can get into, but self-talk is just so important, and that's what becoming more kind of masterful, or why people meditate and mindfulness and, you know, build up the ability to monitor our thoughts and to be more in control of our thoughts so that they are self-supportive.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because, you know, when you think about over the years, and it's not just obviously in golf is what we're talking about here tonight, but in really every aspect of our lives, you know, when you're not internally confident with your dialogue, how it can change your patterns very easily, how you, not just the way you think, but how the way you carry yourself. You see quite often in other areas of our lives where people have kind of been beaten down verbally for whatever reason, and, you know, their shoulders aren't pulled back. They're kind of slumped over. They look down on the ground and that. So that internal dialogue is extremely important, and it plays a key role in golf as well. You know, if you, and Peter, this is where I'm going to come to you on this one. This goes to really how we focus on our game overall. When we compare professionals on the tours compared to many of our high handicap or amateur golfers, there's one distinct difference that I see. Obviously, one can hit the ball a little better than the other, but there's another. and that is tour players and lower handicap players focus on their good shots, not the bad ones. And there's a reason for this. We've seen a lot of great ball strikers over the years, and when they've been interviewed and talked to, Ben Hogan comes to mind very early on in his career, and he talks about how he actually only hit maybe 5 or 6 shots in a round that were really that great, and so he had many misses just like everybody else. But the difference is that he focused on his good shots, and he, again, with that self-talk, he motivated himself to get out there and continue to play and didn't focus on every bad hole or every bad shot that he made. This is another area as well that really stymies, I think, a lot of our amateur golfers. Maybe you could share some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Hogan, like any other great player, found reason to motivate themselves in anything. And they use self-talk very often to either take something that someone said, someone did, someone, or maybe even sometimes some of the greatest, competitors in sports history have made up things in their mind that's, to motivate themselves to, achieve or work as hard as they needed to achieve what their goals were and what they're looking to achieve. So I feel as though self-talk is maybe the most important thing when it comes to achieving for high performance at any level, whether you're a better player and you have a certain expectation, or you're a beginning player and you have a certain anxiety about multiple aspects of playing golf. But yeah, it's something we talk about very often. We talk about self-awareness. It's a big part of the conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I think focusing on, we often hear students that will come up to, even the first tee and will internally say to themselves, sometimes even externally, will say, well, I didn't play too well last Saturday, so who knows what's going to happen on the golf course this week. And right away they've set themselves, I think, up for failure because they're expecting to hit bad shots. We all hit bad shots. We know that. That's just part of the game. And that's part of why we enjoy the challenge so much, is to improve and to get better. But if we're constantly regurgitating, if you will, for lack of better words, that internal dialogue in a negative aspect, then we're never going to get over some of the hurdles. And, if you're taking all of that garbage, if you will, or as I like to use the analogy of dragging baggage or luggage like you would at an airport, if you're dragging all that baggage from past rounds to your first tee or to your next round, it's just too heavy, and you're just not going to be able to do what you need to do. I'm going to start back in this final question. It's the same for all of you. And just, again, be mindful we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to let the folks know how to reach out. But I'd like you just, in again, a somewhat brief period of time, I want you to think back to when you first started out in golf yourselves as teacher professionals, because obviously, it's a learning experience. Now, we're all pretty seasoned and veterans, if you will, for lack of better words. But we maybe didn't have a lot of confidence when we first started out. And even though we passed all the things we need to do, so I want you to just basically describe a little bit about what you did for yourself to help gain more confidence to become the teaching professionals that you and coaches that you are. So Pete, I'm going to start with you, and Jamie, and then Peter.
Well, it's a simple one for me. In my young teaching career, I was fortunate enough to be able to start working with the John Jacobs Golf Schools and John himself. If you want to talk about trying to build confidence, giving a presentation in front of John Jacobs, and that'll get you shaking in your boots a little bit. And so, that was a big break for me, because it enabled me to be able to get into a system of teaching that, was based on what John did, and to be able to see some success right away working with the students and being able to have that system as a backdrop in order to start learning what it was all about, and then just trying to move on down the road and gain more knowledge and more confidence as I went along. But I think that was probably probably one of the biggest things. And then I did 2 VIP schools with John. It was just the two of us. And it was probably one of the best things that could have ever happened, because each afternoon and evening, I got to bend his ear and just talk golf, and from A to Z, everything that you can imagine. And he was graceful enough to answer every question, and he was always that way. But I think it was one of the biggest things for me to be able to go from, I was a pretty good player, and I could get some success teaching some people, but I really wanted to learn how to teach. And so being in that environment and being around John himself as well was really cool to see how he handled people, and not only just the way he went about teaching the game, not only for the students, but also teaching the teachers. And so I think for me, that was one of the big building blocks that got me started, and was probably the key thing to pushing me to where I am today and how I teach today.
And I can concur with you. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. You can know as much as you want about golf, but when you have to put it together in a presentation, and you have to, especially in front of somebody like Mr. Jacobs, I can see it can be a little bit of a knee knocker at some point, especially earlier on in your career.
Yep.
But great story. And, we all start somewhere. And that's the thing, is we have mentors, we have people who we've looked up to and have helped sort of guide our path, if you will. And it may be one person, it may be multiple people that have done that influence. But we all have to start somewhere. And this is something that we have to try to instill with our students. Jamie, go ahead. You're next.
Story is reminding me, Mr. Jacobs, this reminds me of when I first started teaching key-eye golf, which is kind of an approach I've developed. It was about 20 years ago, and I was invited to teach at a Midwest section, kind of a national event actually, of the, at the time, Executive Women's Golf Association. And their really big headliner instructor was Shirley Spork, who is not only one of the 13 founders of the LPGA. It was through Shirley that the TNCP, the Teaching and Club Professionals Division, was started in 1959. It was really her doing, and she just had her 93rd birthday. She is still teaching all of us. She's an amazing teacher and mentor. That's like she opens her mouth and teaching and wisdom comes out. So anyways, of course, you've talked to her, Ted. So I, of course, was there at this EWGA event. It was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, I remember, at her clinic and everything that she was teaching. But then, it was my turn, and she hung around and was watching me. So it was kind of a similar situation for me. And, fortunately, I guess I did okay, because we've become very close friends as a result of sharing, passion for teaching. But, for me, I started playing golf when I was 7, way back when, before we had a lot of teaching or, any junior programs or anything. And then when I was 20, 21, I started training in Aikido, Japanese martial art, the nonviolent martial art of peace. And I opened my own Aikido school when I was 25 in San Francisco. I was sort of a baby black belt. And I just, all of a sudden was teaching, and I had to start studying the art of teaching because I had students and I was young, and I was like, whoa. So, and in Aikido, we have class 5-6 days a week. So I taught a lot. And in the course of that, I really kind of learned how to teach. So I came back to golf probably when I was about 40, and went through the entire LPGA educational program, which is exceptional. The LPGA, thanks to Shirley and the pioneers who started it and all who continued since, has really made it their kind of mission to specialize in teaching and in teaching pros how to teach. So I was very grateful for the education. It was about a 7-year experience to get to Class A Pro through the LPGA educational program. And, fortunately, I was able to sort of marry my experience and knowledge and my teaching experience in Aikido, because I think we learn by doing, just like we learn, or we gain confidence, by doing. And so, I had a big teaching background, but then really putting that together with golf. And having opportunities to teach, and I think it's good for us to be in front of people who make us nervous or who make us raise our game. And that's true all the time for building confidence. We might feel our knees knocking, we might feel nervous, and at the same time, I think it really builds our confidence muscle to be challenged in those ways. And most of us, I think, rise to the occasion. And based on that, our confidence level starts to build and go up through experience and, kind of passing through some trials by fire like that.
Yeah, I agree. And great story. And I concur with what you said about Shirley. She definitely not only was one of the founders, but has been a pioneer in many, many aspects along the way, and was certainly somebody, I think, very well deserved of her accolades, but also somebody to certainly look up to and admire in what she did, not only as a player, but as a teacher along the way, and how she inspired so many women and men as well, but particularly women of the LPGA. And it's good to see her still around. Peter, what about you? When you started out some years back, obviously, confidence was a little bit less than what it is today, and you've done some great strides, not only as a coach and a teacher, but also in your business side of in the golf world as well. You've expanded and so forth. What was some of the pivotal moments, if you would mind sharing, that helped gain your confidence along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was a long time ago. I mean, I turned professional at 19, started, teaching at that point. And, the smartest thing I did at that point was just listen. I was very fortunate to be around a lot of very smart people that were, obviously older than I was and much more, experienced in really every field. In golf, we're very fortunate as, professionals and coaches and teaching professionals to be generally around people who have been exceptionally successful in business or whatever their venture is. And, a lot of times I've just benefited the most from being quiet and listening and not interrupting and giving them the time to speak. And a lot of times you can take little nuggets from everyone, and you start to make your own patchwork of what your either coaching ethos is, your identity as a business person, your identity more as, even in my case, an adult. So I think my advice for any coaches out there that no matter what age you might be willing to listen before you talk and to take whatever you want from that conversation and see where it might fit in your own, or if it adds a different lens for you to see through. So that's the best thing I've done. The best advice I can give is to just be quiet, listen, and see if there's the capacity to see through a different lens.
Well said. And I think you're exactly right. I think that we have to, as I mentioned earlier, we have to be good listeners as coaches, not just for our own benefit, but for our students as well. And I think that the better teachers and the better coaches out there are much better listeners than they are talkers. And what I mean by that is they are able to, when they do speak with a confidence and with an ability that gets the message across without having to necessarily go on and on and on for hours, number one, but also be able to hit right on the mark each and every time because they've taken the time to listen to their students very carefully to what their needs, what their wants, and what their desires are. And have maybe, in some cases, have been able to relatively quickly come up with a plan that the student can execute to reach the goals and the desires and the outcomes that they're looking for. And I think that's what really defines it. And, whether we get it from one person or a multitude of people, I think it's very, very important. I know you all touched on this, is really to listening to people who were in a position that were a little bit more advanced than what we were, have helped us to grow in our profession. And obviously, we might emulate in some ways, but we kind of make it our own. And we take some good points from each of the people that have come along the way and have allowed us to, as Peter, as you put, is look through a different lens. And I think that helps us all the way around. I'm going to give you guys a few moments. Jamie, I'm going to let you go last because I know you have something special that you want to mention here before we go off air for the panel. But so Pete, and then Peter, and then Jamie. Pete, how can the folks reach out to you?
They can reach me at plainsimplegolf.com. The plain is Plane. All my contact information's out there. So, all the different social media links are there. So just hit the page and you'll find everything you need.
Perfect. Peter? Peter, I'm not sure if you got your mic. That's okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
No, people can reach me at gonpi.org, and if most of my handles on social, especially Instagram, where I'm most active, is at Daily Golf Coach. So thanks for having me on, Ted. It's always great to be here with you.
Well, I appreciate it, both Pete and Peter. Thank you very much. Jamie, quickly, how the folks can reach out to you, and then I know you have something that you want to mention that you got cooking on the weekend.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ted. And thanks to everybody. This was just a wonderful discussion. People can reach me at my website, which is kiaigolf.com, Kiai golf.com. It will actually link you to the centeredway.com, same website, kiaigolf.com. I always say this, but I'm a talker. I like to talk on the phone, so 760-492-GOLF, 4653. 760-492-4653. It's a great way to reach me, and, of course, the website, kiaigolf.com. And thank you, Ted. I would like to invite everybody. I'm teaching a special virtual Ki Golf Mastery School, and it starts on Saturday. It will be 5 days. Saturday, Sunday, we'll take off for Memorial Day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And West Coast time, it's 9 to 10:30 in the morning, an hour and a half each day. Do the math for your other time zones. And it's really going to be very rich, very full. We've got some pros coming and people from Canada, different places around the country, and we'll be covering all areas of the game. And I'm a very holistic person, so we're going to be looking at body, mind, golf fitness, swing patterning people have never seen, understanding what I call the energy facts of life and golf, the mental game, mental, emotional, self-mastery, rising to lower scores, integrated course management. So we'll be covering a lot of things, and we'll be doing, even though it's virtual, there'll be a lot of on our feet, experiential learning as well as information. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of good discussion because we have such a variety of players as well as pros who will be attending. And it's, so, right off the bat, it's $99, kind of less than the price of one lesson. And I think it's going to be a great experience and would certainly love to invite anyone to join in. Pretty easy to find under events on my website.
Okay, so they go to your website, and then under events, that's where they can register.
Yeah, they can register under events, and it should be pretty easy. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. Mm-hmm.
Not a problem. Well, Pete, Peter, and Jamie, thank you very much, as always, for bringing your best here on the Coach's Corner panel. I enjoyed tonight's discussion, and hopefully, for those of you tuning into the show, have learned some valuable tips on how to build up your confidence as you get out of this sort of pandemic hibernation, if you will, and get out there. Be safe first and foremost, no matter where you go. But if you're venturing out this weekend to do various things and particularly play some golf, just take it easy and realize that you're not going to be mastering the golf course necessarily the first time out if that's your first time. So take heed to some of the tips that we talked about here on confidence. Get out there, warm up, practice. Don't show up 5 minutes before your tee time. Get out there a few minutes early if you're able to practice. And if not, practice a little bit around the house. Do some putting drills and so forth. There's lots of great stuff. You can reach out to any one of the folks here in doing so. So thanks, guys, as always, and I'll see you next time on the Coach's Corner panel. Have a great holiday weekend, and thank you, as always, for your time.
You too, Ted. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Ted. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was the Coach's Corner panel, and Pete Buchanan, Peter Agazarian, and Jamie Leno-Zimron. A great group of folks have been on the show for the last several years, we've, as most of you that have followed the show for any length of time have been following the Coaches Corner panel segment. We've had a lot of great teacher professionals and coaches along the way, and we always try to have a lively discussion, talk about different things. And I chose the discussion we talked about building confidence for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was appropriate for this time right now in our history when we're dealing with this pandemic and a lot of things going on. So people have been kind of hunkering down, if you will, in their home or in some sort of quarantine, and are just slowly but surely in many places are able to get back out and do some things. And so our confidence level maybe isn't quite as good. So we did about that. And then also my very special guest tonight, who I'm going to introduce now, and I will bring him out. John Taylor is a performance mind coach, and he's also an NLP master practitioner. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. I'll bring him out, and then we'll get him to explain a few things along the way. John has joined the military in the UK in January of 1995. He was 17 years old. His first deployment was in Bosnia, and during that time as a professional soldier, he remained focused on developing his leadership skills and never stopped learning about what it takes to succeed. Highlights of his service was in 2006 when he worked teaching, guiding, and coaching young men and women as recruits to become the next generation of soldiers. He left the forces in 2010, and shortly afterwards, as many have become diagnosed with PTSD, he struggled to find his way through life for a while, and while facing some of the horrible memories that he experienced. But in 2011, he discovered NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. We'll get him to explain again more of that. This helped him become more grounded and install some coping strategies. It had such an impact on John that he went on to become an NLP master practitioner. And of course, he loves this great game that we enjoy, golf. He's been playing at a very young age, as he was introduced by his father, who was also a former military. And he's been playing ever since. So we're going to talk about a little bit about his background, and then we're going to talk about what he's doing now with his career and how he might be able to help some of you golfers that are tuning into the show tonight. So please let me welcome my very special guest, and it's in the wee hours over in the UK, John Taylor. Good evening or morning, I guess, depending on how you look at it, John. Welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hi, Ted. Yeah, it's 1 a.m., so the family's in bed. I've sort of come down, and I've just been listening to Coach's Corner there and the panel that you just had on. And firstly, I'd like to thank you for your kind words of that introduction and for allowing me to come on and talk about them kind of things and where I'm at now. And it's the guys and the girls that you just had on there, Peter and Jamie, absolutely phenomenal in terms of what they've done. I had a little read of their profiles. I didn't really know too much about them. This is all new to me, and some of the work that they're doing. With Jamie talking about being, like water. One of Bruce Lee's sayings is be like water because it always finds its way. And the body, that's what it's made up of, and the way that she comes across with her language and she communicates holistically, that's the kind of things that I'm doing with my clients as well. And yeah, absolutely brilliant to listen to them talk about, the confidence and how they communicate with their future generation of golfers. It's brilliant. But yeah, thank you. I really appreciate just having this time.
Not a problem, and I appreciate you taking this time. As you mentioned, it's 1 o'clock in the morning there, so I know it's very, very in the wee hours, and for you, I know it's not a problem. But as you mentioned, the rest of the family have gone to rest for a little while, so we'll try not to get too loud and rowdy on the show here and wake anybody up. But I appreciate it, John, as always, and thank you for joining me on Golf Talk Live. I want to very quickly just talk about some things, just so that we can kind of set up for our discussion. As I mentioned at the top, introducing you, that you joined the military some years ago. And I'm assuming, as I mentioned a little bit later on in the intro, your father was also military. So was that just a decision you sort of followed in his footsteps, or was that just something that you had a sort of a desire to do yourself?
I think growing up in a military family, and at that time we constantly moved around. So I think I attended about 9 different schools, lived in 8 different countries. It was every 2 years. I just remember packing up and go on the move. And I think that's installed a little bit of flexibility in my thinking, and I'm okay with change. I think because of that. But you just end up in that cycle, and you think, you know, it was about when I was about 13 years old. We moved back to our hometown in Newcastle, the northeast of England, where both my mother and father are from, and I finished my high school days, but constantly moving, having to make new friends, learning about new transport timings, you know, different routes to school, and every school that you go to, they're all at different educational standards. So you could literally be, you know, learning quite high education in one school, and then you could go and you could be a little bit behind, or you could be in front in certain topics. I was definitely good at geography. I knew that because of the amount of moving that we've done. So I was okay with knowing where I was, I suppose, in life. And again, that served me well. So then naturally, I just fell into joining the military at 17. You know, left school and applied. I got knocked back the first time. I passed all the physical tests, passed all of the assignments that you need to get into the military, and I was quite underweight at the time. I was still, 16 years old. I didn't have much meat on the bones, and they said, "Can you just go away and bulk up a little bit and become a little bit more robust?" So that was quite a big setback, and one of the things that I teach is about resilience and being able to deal with things that happen to you in life, and how do you bounce back from that. And that was probably my first upset moment, and I come back from the weekend away, and I said to my mother, I'm not going this time. I've got to go away and train and get a little bit stronger and come back with a bit more robust. And off I went and just got a mechanic's job, and then used to run across the bridge every day to work and just get really fit. And then I went back and passed, and at 17 there I was on the train heading towards the training establishment, which is actually the film Full Metal Jacket. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with Stanley Kubrick.
Yes.
It was filmed at the same place where I'd done my training, a place called Basenbourne in Cambridge. But they put palm trees up at the time, but there's definitely not palm trees there. So,
no.
So that's where I've done that. And the film Memphis Belle, I think, with Mel Gibson, that was filmed in the same place.
Oh, okay.
But so that was my first ever day of training, and I remember turning up along with another, 48 other guys who were in the similar position from all over the country in different parts of the world, all doing the same thing. Part of my military journey, I think. Yeah.
I'm sure it was probably much different, your experience, than what Hollywood made it with those two movies. I'm sure they, as you mentioned, with the palm trees and so forth, I'm sure it was quite a different experience and a different look for you. I have just very quickly, because I don't want to take up your time, but I want to mention, because you hit upon something that I can relate to. I was, of course, I'm not sure if you gathered or not, but I was born and raised in Canada. I live in the U.S. now, but so I was in our military for 5 years, not as long as you were in yours, but and was stationed at Halifax, Nova Scotia. But an interesting part that you mentioned, the very early part, was when I went for my initial entry, passed all of the exams, but I was, like you, I was a little bit underweight, a little bit thin. I was always thin growing up. And when I went for my physical, they said I needed to come back in a few weeks, and they'd have to give me another one, otherwise I couldn't get in. And I literally, the day when I went back for my physical the second time, I actually, my mother happened to drive me that time, and I was 17 like you when I got in. And I actually had 2 rolls of quarters in each pocket, in addition to eating a bunch of ice cream and drinking a big 2-liter bottle of soda before I went in, just to add extra weight. And I think I just made it by something like 1/10 of a pound or something. And the woman that had me on the scale basically laughed, and she said, "Well, normally, you'd have to strip down for this, but she said, I'm going to help you out. You can leave your clothes." And I said, "Good," because I said I got 4 rolls of quarters in my pocket. So we had a good laugh over that. So we had a very similar entry into our military career. But I want to move on a little bit here, because you spent obviously 15 years. You rose to the rank of sergeant, and obviously had many multiple tours, including Afghanistan and others. And obviously, that's something that for those that have never experienced that kind of thing, don't understand exactly what many of the soldiers and both men and women have had to deal with. Did that take a toll, both physically and mentally, your time at some of your deployments? And maybe just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. Well done on getting through with some money in your pocket as well. That's a good thing. So you got into it, and then 5 years that you're done, I can imagine you learn stuff along the way like we all do. And I think when you're at such a young age, you're just absorbing everything that's in your path. You're in this motion, aren't you? You're just learning, developing still. You're not fully developed. You're going from teenager to a man, and it was 17, we deployed to Bosnia, and I remember like the year before I was in school, and then literally a year later I was walking around villages that had been, bombed and ethnic cleansed, which is, horrific to see. But with a rifle in my hand at 17 thinking, this is a bit strange. This time last year I had a pen and I was doing math and English. So a shock to the system, but you soon learn to fit in with your team. Everybody knows their role. You start to learn, courage, to be brave. It sends you to, different realms of thinking. The preparation, you spoke about preparation before on the panel. The military's out there, it preps you for these things, but then when you physically do them, are you 100% ready for them situations? A little bit like golf, you prep yourself. You do all of the training, you do all the muscle memory stuff, your nutrition's good, you're feeling the vibe, your confidence is up there, and as soon as you cross that line, you're on that first tee, like a boxer going into the ring or a footballer going onto the court. You're in business, you're doing your job, you're in your office. And when you train hard enough and when you put yourself in that position, you don't really think about what it can do to you because you're just doing the thing that you're training to be. And I'm completely thankful for every single skill that I learned within the military, and it's serving me well now in today. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I can say this.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. No, you answered it brilliantly. And that was the same for me. I mean, obviously, I didn't go to Afghanistan or Bosnia, and most of mine was during peacetime. But you do learn a lot of skills, especially at 17 years old, when you're, firing weapons for the first time, and you're feeling that just the raw power of it. It's a little bit. It's exciting on one hand, but it's a little bit surreal when you think about some of the firepower that they're putting into your hands at that age, and then having to take that and then being deployed and basically being required and responsible for other people in addition to yourself. It's quite a lot for somebody to handle. And obviously, and I want to touch on one more thing before we sort of shift gears here, because what I want to do, John, is I want to kind of lay the foundation for the bulk of our discussion tonight, because I want people to understand why you're doing what you're doing. But as a result of your many years of military training and obviously deployments, you develop PTSD, which many people have heard that expression before, but perhaps are not really familiar with what it actually means and what it is. So can you maybe explain to the listeners just a little bit, just briefly, so they can understand what PTSD is?
So post-traumatic stress, it can be built up over one significant event, or can be built up over a number of years of how you interpret the world, or how you see and feel and respond to situations that have happened by what you do. And so people can get PTSD from being in a car crash or a relationship or being bullied in certain ways. It's a traumatic event that can happen over time, or it could be one significant event. And what's interesting is that when there's an incident that happens either in the military or in life or in the emergency services, and there's witnesses that see that event, the police will actually separate the two witnesses because they'll get a different version of what they've seen. So everybody responds differently to one situation. me and you, Ted, we could see the same thing. You know, we could see an accident happen in front of our eyes, but we could actually physically respond to that incident, and we could be okay with it. And then 5-6 years down the line, something might happen that could trigger that memory and then drop you into that state and anchor you into that place, and then recreate the thing that might have happened. So the symptoms that are linked, there's hundreds of symptoms linked out there towards PTSD. You know, you can become isolated, lack of confidence, sleepless nights. You know, you could have traumatic dreams, night terrors, them kind of things. So there's different, and people respond differently depending on what the situation is. And for me, that's one of the things. It was probably a little bit of what I'd seen in Bosnia at such a young age, but more a little bit what I'd seen in Afghanistan. It was a little bit how you would fight or flight situation. So when your life's threatened or you feel like something might happen, you drop into this flight or fight mode. And there's also flight or fight and freeze. So we do the three things. And what happened was when I left the military, you were away from all of your comrades, all of your brothers. You've got nobody to talk to, and you feel alone. And that's really, it just hit home, and I struggled. And I reached out to a guy who was ex-military, and he was using NLP as a therapy to help veterans recover from post-traumatic stress. And I was fortunate enough to knock on his door and seek help. And then we've done 8 or 9 sessions. We've done a bit of time code intervention, which is a bit hypnotic. It's quite mindful. It's looking at the situation from a dissociated point of view, so there's no attachment. And he realised that, you know, it had such an impact on me that I want to go away and train to support other veterans. And that's how I sort of ended up in the NLP world, through suffering.
So explain just for the folks, again, for those that are not involved in it, and just so they have a better understanding. I mean, you touched on a little bit, but as you mentioned, you got out of the military in around 2010, and about a year later, you discovered through this gentleman NLP, which is, again, stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Explain what exactly that is. What does it mean?
So NLP was
that terminology and what's involved in it. There's some sessions with him. Go ahead.
Sorry, Ted, you just broke up a little bit there, so I don't know if I jumped in too early. But NLP was discovered in the late 70s in the US, and it was to model excellence. It was to look at, they took the best business coaches, they took people in sales, they took relationship counselors, psychotherapists, and they started modeling what they were doing with their clients, and they picked up this language and they created the NLP. The neuro part is your sensories, your primary sensory, and how you learn through visual, through touch, and through sound. And how do we, when we all learn in different ways, we've all got stronger primary sensories. You know, I learned through listening, repeating back, and practicing. Some people have to learn by seeing and doing. Some people just have to learn by feeling. And if you think golf's the same, isn't it? People just get a good feel of the club. They get a good feel for the shot, or they like to hear the sweet spot. Did you hear that? And people will use different language depending on what their key driving and learning is. And then the linguistic part is about language and how we communicate, both internal and external, but not just with words, but also our physiology, so our presence, so non-verbal communication. And the panel spoke about before about being a good listener. Now, if you can be a good listener but be present, you're actually communicating with your clients in a non-verbal way by just being present. And, you know, the majority of communication is actually non-verbal. It is just how we are, and that's why, you know, your posture is important. That's why the way that you come across is really key. And the programming part is about behaviors, which is linked to emotions, so our emotional states. And it's got really nice ways of feeding through how we can just perform. And people like Louis Oosthuizen, you know, South African golfer, is a big advocate of NLP, and him and his wife study and practice NLP. And then at the time in 2011, because it had such a profound impact on me personally, it changed my perspective, I suppose, in the world, and give me some coping strategies and my love of golf, I was like, said to myself, I had this eureka moment. I wonder if I could actually go and start using this in the golfing industry. And at the time, I actually started working for the charity. So I gave 3 or 4 years helping veterans, helping them with anxiety, depression, and helping them get over their horrors of war, I suppose, and getting them to a better place. And then in 2015, I decided just to take a leap of faith and set off on my journey doing NLP in the golfing world. And this is where I am now, 5 years later, doing what I love.
And you do a lot of things which is really interesting, and I want to talk about some of them. You know, obviously NLP has something that has helped you cope with, as you mentioned, as a result of your military experience, and the things that you've learned and have been taught along the way, utilizing NLP, as you said, has sort of flicked that switch and said, okay, you know, I love the game of golf. How can I apply what I've learned here? And you've obviously put some things together, and over the last number of years, you've worked with professional and amateur golfers to help support them on and off the golf course with being mindfulness and emotional techniques. So, just give us an example. I know it's very difficult when you don't have per se a student handy, but give an example of maybe some of the issues that golfers typically have, and what some of the things through your training and techniques as a master NLP practitioner, what are some specific things that you're doing that's helping golfers handle some of those various situations? Maybe give us a couple of examples, how they're handling it with some of the skills that you're utilizing and helping teaching them.
Yeah. The entwining NLP into what I've learned throughout the years with the mentoring and guiding and becoming a coach in the military about what it takes to become successful. The NLP, I think, is just the springboard or the foundation of what I use. But a lot of my work is really, like they said on the panel before, it's about getting to know the individual. So what kind of family life that they've got, what do they do off the course, what kind of things makes them tick, what are they interested in, what kind of behaviours do they run, what patterns do they use. And just by explaining to people about how emotions work, or how your character is, or how you behave, is a bit different way than trying to get somebody from A to B. So when people start to portray different types of emotions, like frustration, or they might be a little bit angry that they can't get to a certain position, or they can't reduce the scores that they want to, it's asking how they behave that way, or why they do what they do, and what impact that has on the whole system. And it's like the onion effect, you peel away the layers and eventually find the root cause and you fix that and things happen. But people aren't broken, and people sometimes turn up and think that they are. So I trained in NLP therapy, but I mainly really coach people and guide them to better mental fitness, to become a little bit more present, teach them about what mindfulness means, teach them how to do a little bit of meditation properly, teach them how to just become that all-round character, that individual, their identity, focusing on them areas. So then when it does eventually come to playing them killer shots, or they're in them stressful situations, or they haven't been in that position before, because they practice and understand how to manage their emotions, they can then deal with situations better in the future.
And this comes in through your program that you've launched called What's in the Bag, and that's essentially what it is a guide to better mental fitness. You've touched on some things, generally what you do with that and how you handle it with students. What are some common scenarios that you've come across? You've worked with, as you mentioned, professionals and amateur golfers alike. And just let me preface this a little bit. Many of the professionals that we see on tour, as an example, most of them go to what we refer to, some people don't like to use this terminology, but a mental coach. Many of the best players in the world have a mental coach. And I don't imagine it's just to to have somebody to talk to per se, but it's obviously to help put them in this a mindset, if you will, to be able to go out there and navigate around tour a little more effectively. So this is essentially what you're doing, is you're acting as a mind coach or mental coach, if you will, for golfers at various levels through your program. Is that generally the idea?
Yeah. It's becoming the go-to guy, and people that come to me now that I'm finding, firstly, I know within the first 15 minutes of an assessment if that's what they really want to do. Do they want to be accountable for their actions? Because I'm pretty tough when it comes to that kind of thing. Because is this what you really want? What is your why?
Right.
You know, are you going to waste my time? And I don't. You know, the biggest gift that you can give somebody, Ted, is time and space, and that is a precious thing. But we have to learn to give ourselves that as well as people. And in this busy world, we forget how to do that because we get caught up in trying to look at the next technique or the next best thing, or we compare ourselves with the things that are going on social media. There's that much information around us at the moment. It can become overwhelming, I think. And that if I can speak to people in a calm and relaxed manner and bring them into a different way of approaching situations. So some of the things that I get asked is, why do I get so frustrated when I know that I've got the ability to do something? And we go back to, well, you've committed to the thing that you want to do. Let's think about how you can now respond to why you feel that way. Because life is about response rather than doing. You know, we are human beings as well, so we have to be rather than do. And everybody comes to me with completely different visions, completely different goals, completely different aspirations. And it's my job to align myself with that person's vision because it's theirs, and then work with their model of the world, and then work on a plan of action to get them to the required standard that they want to be.
You know, John, what's interesting about that, and I agree 100% with what you just said, I think for the professionals obviously have come to understand that as we in the golf industry learn more and hear more and see more of what's going on, it's very easy to understand why so many professionals turn to somebody like yourself in helping them cope, not just out in the golf course, but even off the golf course and decompress, if you will, in some ways. Because, you know, I don't think we as amateurs or as outsiders appreciate the level of pressure that these guys and gals put themselves under when they're out in the golf course. They think, well, you know, a lot of times people think, well, they're out there having 4 rounds of fun, but that we know that's not the case. I mean, it's very high pressure. They're playing for a lot of money. They're playing in front of, you know, thousands of fans physically or in person, but, you know, millions when it's telecast on TV. But for the amateurs, they don't understand the necessity. You know, when they think when they're coming to the lesson tee to see me, they're thinking, well, you know what, I just want to fix this slice, and I want it, but they don't realize the importance of the mental side of the game or the mind side of the game and how that plays a key role. That, in your opinion, would you agree, is a more important role than actually the physical side?
100%. I agree with you, Ted, that we sometimes live in a bit of a backward society and we become results driven and we look at the new next shiny object and we think that that's going to be able to the slice or do the thing that we need to. But first and foremost, we have to become anchored to our position in that point, in that moment, to be able to play the best golf. To say playing your best golf in the call about this thing that we step into, the zone. But you've got to be able to step in and out of that zone as well, because it's quite tiring to be full heightened physically and mentally for 4 hours going around the golf course. So you've got to be able to adapt and be flexible and be like water, as we said before, you know, it finds its way. And I think that if you've got the right attitude and you've got the right belief system and you're running the right patterns and you're talking to yourself properly and you're using internal dialogue and you're absorbing and you're responding to situations. And Rory McIlroy's amazing the way that he talks about, you know, he says that he now meditates the night before a big competition. but the way that he's just so humble about the whole, everything that he does in golf is down to his parents and how they had to work jobs and being grateful and having gratitude. And golf courses are also mindful places. They're beautiful. And some people forget to stop and just look around. And even just by bringing your breathing to a certain way or relaxing your state of mind, can that fix slices? Can that help you physically and mentally perform better? I think it can, and it does. But some people end up chasing the wrong tool rather than having to. But you can practice being mindful every day for a couple of minutes in every waking hour. You can just literally sit there and plonk yourself on the settee or sit on a meditation mat. But you don't have to be meditating to be mindful. But you can be mindful of the things that you're putting in your mouth, mindful of where you're standing, mindful of the things people are saying around you. And if you practice your mind to be that way, you become then more mindful and better at doing the thing that you want to do.
I couldn't agree more. And just to add a quick note, I was at the PGA Merchandising show back in January of this year, and looking at a lot of the latest equipment out there, and it goes to the point you made is, everybody's looking for the latest and greatest shiny thing. And I've always said to students, I've said, I would rather you, whether it's with me or somebody else, I would rather you take that $400 that you're planning on spending on that new driver and getting some good quality lessons to learn how to use the tool better than spending that money on a club hoping that it's going to fix and solve and cure the problems that you're facing out in the golf course. And I would probably expand that to say to work with somebody like yourself and get to the root of the problem, because a lot of times it's not that the person doesn't know how to swing the golf club, but they've got so much junk going on in their head that by the time it's, as I mentioned earlier, if you heard that part or not, it's like going to the airport, they're dragging 3 or 4 bags of luggage to the terminal.
Yeah.
It gets heavy. And they're doing the same thing in the golf course. They're thinking about the rounds that they played last week or with their foursome the previous weekend, and they're taking that to the first tee. So I would rather than spend that money and work with a mind coach like yourself and decompress and get rid of some of those thoughts, so that when they're going to that first tee, they're only thinking about one thought, and that's putting it out to wherever their target is, and not thinking about all of the bad things that happened the weeks before. And that's something I know that you work with all the time with your students. I want to fast forward a few more years, and I want to come up into June of 2019. John, you had the opportunity to meet and work with Dr. Joseph Parent, who is the author of Zen Golf and obviously a keynote speaker. He's been a big inspiration to you as well in helping you pave your way. And what would you like to say about Joseph?
Well, Dr. Joe, I think I'll share with you the story on how I ended up meeting Dr. Joe, how I reached out to him. But you mentioned about the PGA show there, and I just want to quickly thank Jackie Arnott, who you met at the PGA show, who you had a conversation for me to be on this show tonight, and I'm grateful for that. And you're a big advocate of next links with David Schultz as well. I met David in 2015 at the PGA show. He's ex-Navy, I'm ex-military. We went for a burger. He was telling me his plans, and we hit it off from day one. And I've aligned myself with David's vision in growing the game of golf and putting a smile on people's faces. And if we can play golf with that energy, with that vibrational frequency, with just that sense of love towards the game, then we can grow it in a different way. And David's creating this indoor golf and entertainment system that is going to create an entry point where people can just go and have fun and enjoy golf, because the numbers were on a decline. We can't get away from that. And because of the current situation and golf now being one of the sports that we can play again, hopefully that number will start to increase. But then I got caught up a little bit in different parts and got in different projects using virtual reality with golf and things like that. And it was only last year that I decided to come back to my original purpose, was that I set off to do coaching in golf and on the mind. And this is what I wanted to do. And personally, I got sidetracked with different projects. And I listened to a TED talk, and it was about asking for help. And this woman said that if you were going to ask for help, there's 4 things you should do. 1, don't just ask your buddy down the road to, to move a settee and there's £20. Thank you very much. And if you're going to ask for help, make sure that you don't do it on a text message or an email, but pick up the phone and use the phone as a telephone and actually physically ask the person. And the third thing is that make sure that you're direct with that help that you want. So can you lend me £100 so I can do a coaching course, which will then allow me to go off and train so I can help others? Or can you give me a list of this interview because I'm stuck? And the fourth thing is that if you go back to that person and tell them that impact that the help has had, the gratitude for it, it sends this energy wave and it keeps that continuity going. So you go back to the person, oh, thank you so much for lending me the £100, this happened. So I listened to this TED Talk and I was sitting on the bus and I was going to work. And then I've read Dr. Joe's book, Zen Golf Mastering the Mental Game, from front to back. And it's not really about golf. Golf is the platform, but it's about you as a person, as an individual. What you do off the course is fundamentally important. And I've actually printed off what I wrote to Joe. I sent him a message because I couldn't ring him up because I was in the UK. So I went against one of the rules from the TED Talk. And I was like, hi, Dr. Joe. I trust all is well. I listened to a TED Talk this morning and it was talking about asking for help. And I came across an article to do with mindfulness in golf and found it very interesting. I am on a personal journey as a coach within the golfing game, and I have results-driven theories that I feel that can benefit golfers. Now I'm at the stage where I want to progress, and I've wrote some programs. Would you have, or can I have the opportunity to speak with you and talk about my current projects and ideas and going forward? I would really appreciate some time. And mainly what I'm trying to do is to empower individuals, and I'll be grateful for any guidance or collaborations. And let's have some fun. Love and peace, John. And that evening, Dr. Joe sent me a message and said, I'm going to phone you tomorrow. And straight away, you talk about your confidence, and I was saying, oh my God, Dr. Joe's going to ring me tomorrow. How's this happened? Because I reached out, and then we had a Skype call, and I remember he looked at me down the screen and he says, what's your question to me? And I says, will you mentor me? And he went, yes. And from that moment on, we started working together. I sent him my program, my What's in the Bag. He had a look at it. He sent it to a friend, a doctor of psychology. And then from there, we started to evolve it, and he helps me out, and we speak once a month, and we have a session, and he's just so helpful. His stories are amazing, who he learned his stuff from, where he's come from, what he's done, what he does, working with Vijay Singh and Christy Kerr and other top professionals within the game, and how he teaches kids mindfulness. And it's just brilliant. And to have him, I suppose, in my corner and me be under his wing is an absolute dream, and it's phenomenal to even work with him. And I look forward to continuing that relationship with him as well. And I know that he's on the show next month as well, so you can have a good conversation with him then. But yeah, I really like to just thank Joe for accepting, I suppose, my offer or asking him to be mentored, and here we are. That's what we're doing, working together, just like that. Just because I reached out and I was brave enough to do it, I suppose. But at the time, I was pretty scared writing that note.
Well, I always think, I always say, ask and you shall receive. And if you don't ask, then you won't. And, I've, along my way, have had many, mentors that I've looked up to and have helped me, in my life's journey. And I often reflect back to those times. What were some things specifically that through your conversations with Dr. Joseph that have helped sort of clean up, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You had a plan, you've had a vision, and you sent him that plan, and he's come back to you with some things. Were there some specific things that he said to you, John, that I think this would help achieve what you want to do if you did this? Were there some examples you could maybe give us of what that conversation went like?
For sure. One of the very first conversations. So the Watching the Bag program, I was on a plane going to Rome for a 3-day summit, and it come to me, how do I get psychology across to golfers without being too psychology? And I wrote in this notebook, what's in the bag? But what's in the bag is really what's in your mind. And the way that the program works is that I've broke items of the golf bag down. So we get a golf club, that's in the bag. And what you do is you would write the word club down the left-hand side of your page, and the first letter, C, would be your character. So we would talk about your character. L is your language and how you communicate with, both internal and external. U is what is useful and what's not. So what kind of patterns are you running that used to work but no longer do? And B is about behaviours. So it was looking at taking different items of the bag but without becoming too psychology. And the first conversation I had with Dr. Joe was, the first C that I had was conscious and subconscious mind. And he straight away, he said, no, John, you could not talk to golfers. They won't get it. Think of a different think of a different meaning beginning with C. And straight away I was like, character. He went, you've got it. So we have conversations about the way that I come across and communicate with golfers because of his experience within the golfing industry and the people that he's coached. So just about changing my approach, my language, the way learning about mindfulness in a more deeper sense. We have conversations. He tells me stories about the people that he's worked with. And he always says at the end of every call as well, is there anything else that you want from me? And I actually started a podcast in January this year, and it's called Keep Sharing. And Joe says that to me all the time. Just keep sharing, John. Just keep sharing information. Doesn't matter what it is, people are interested. And they're the kind of conversations that we have, and they're fun. And they're really enlightened by what we talk about and the future of what Joe's done over the years. And hopefully I can continue the great work that he's done with just different methods and theories. But it's brilliant. I just love having that 1 hour with him every month. It's good fun. It definitely spurs me on.
Well, and what he said about keep sharing, I think, is so important, and that's really why I do what I do here with the shows. And I've probably said this at least 1,000 times, both on and off the air, if not more. These shows, I do this show and I do another one Tuesday mornings called The Women of Golf, and my good friend LPGA professional Cindy Miller and I co-host that together. And these shows are not about me. It's not the Ted Oderico Golf Show. It's about bringing people like yourself, the many other guests that come on, and sharing their knowledge and their expertise and their experiences with my audience. It's not about accolades for me or glory or what have you. That to me really doesn't mean anything. My satisfaction out of doing these programs, much like what you're doing, is knowing that I'm sharing from some of the best people in this industry with my listeners, just like we did in the first segment before you came on. On the Coach's Corner panel, I do that every week, and we have a different group every week, different players, and many of them come on once a month. Some of the same players like that you heard tonight will come on again sometime next month, and sometimes the month following. But the idea is that we kind of pool our resources. I take my knowledge, they take their knowledge, and we have discussions like we did earlier on and share that. And that's essentially really what you're doing, is you're not only teaching specific skills to help people handle themselves, not only on the golf course but off the golf course, but you're sharing other people's knowledge, like Dr. Joe and others that you come across and have worked with. You're sharing those life experiences and that knowledge to help make them a better person or persons in the case of a group. And that's really what it's all about. And, that's why I'm very fascinated by your story, because you had really a very diverse background. You were military to start off with, but you had a passion and love for the game of golf, and you've managed to learn from the skills and learn from the education that the military gave you, both in and out of battle, and have now learned to apply it to the various techniques that you're using through NLP and other forms, and sharing that knowledge and helping others reach and attain their goals and desires. And that's really what life is all about. And I give you credit for doing that, because that shows the first C, character. That shows a lot about your character, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have you on my show.
Thank you so much, Ted. Them words they mean so much to me, and what you just said. And I'm grateful to even just have this opportunity to share with you the stories about what I've done. And as you know, everybody's so unique and individualized. We've all got a story to share. And when you tap into people's true potential and let them share that story, it is empowering for the individual to go off and believe and be inspired by the people that they've listened to, by what they've done. And that's all I've done throughout my whole life. I've looked at people who have been a little bit, in a leadership role and said, one day I want to be like him. Looked at the next person, what do I need to do? I even said to Dr. Joe, who's been your teachers in life, the Shambhala warrior stuff, which goes back, 2,500 years, and tapping into that sort of realms. And you've done the same. I would like to echo them same words, Ted. You've done your military service. You're doing a good service on this show by allowing people to come on and share their story, and you're doing an amazing job for allowing people and creating that platform. And it's a little bit like what I wanted to do with the podcast as well. I interviewed a guy. I just wanted to quickly share with you. You might know him. He's called David Finn from Canada. I had him on my show. Phenomenal guy. He's talking about the World Hickory Golf Tournament that he plays in North Berwick, and he's invited me to play that in October. And he was world champion the first time he ever picked up the club. But his stories about the countries he's played golf in, and there's a guy called Sunil Satil who's a Canadian. His dad was Indian, his mom was Irish, and he lived in Canada, and he runs golf tours around Ireland. And his story, and Derek Murray, club fitter at Augusta, telling me about how him and his wife had breakfast in the crow's nest and stuff. But it's just I've had some amazing people on the show. Guy in Mauritius designing golf courses, and I only started doing this in January. And you do get to listen to people's inspirational thoughts, their pitfalls, and the success stories. And if we keep doing that as in the golfing world, hopefully it'll have a knock-on effect and disseminate outwards, and then people can be inspired by what they hear as well. And Joe's a great speaker at doing that, and as you are as well. And I appreciate the words that you said there. You've made me go a little bit emotional. Sorry, but it's nice. Thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. And
there's some good folk out there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what can I say? I'm Canadian, so we're good, us Canadians. I got to tell you, we're brothers in arms. The Canadians and our brothers over in the UK. We served together many years in different fronts. But John, I look at it this way, and for me, when it comes to golf, I, much like yourself, my father taught me the game. I didn't take any formal training or lessons in this game. I learned to play with my father, who was a very, very good golfer, and I watched and learned and listened to people along the way that have taught me many other aspects other than just how to hit the ball. And for me, when it came a point in time for me to become I knew I wasn't going to compete with the Nicklases and the Palmers and that crew. So I thought, well, rather than doing that, let me think of another way. And I always enjoyed helping others. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I could teach what I've learned to somebody else. And so that's what I've done. That's why I became a teaching professional some years back, and I've been doing that for 25 plus years. These programs were something that came in about 8 years ago that I decided to do because radio was something that was of interest to me. And so that was sort of how that came about. But like you, I enjoy helping other people, and I do my part and you do your part. And I think that working together, right now we're all going through a very difficult time with this global pandemic. A lot of people, as I mentioned earlier in the show, and as you're aware of, have been cooped up, and it's very mentally and emotionally draining for some. And we, on the surface, we kind of joke it off and laugh it off, but truth of the matter, that there are people are frightened, or there's people that are scared and unsure of what the future holds. And we want to do things to ease that tension. And as you mentioned earlier, golf is one of the lucky games that as we break open from this this global tragedy, golf is one of those few games that we're going to be able to get out a little sooner than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
And people are going to need help to bring their games back up to snuff, if you will, because they've been laying low in some cases for many months, and then you've got a couple of months added on with the pandemic that people have been cooped up, so their games are going to be rusty. So it's not only going to need the teaching side from me, but they're going to need somebody like yourself to be able to get them back on the straight and narrow, as it were. So I want to take these last couple of minutes because we don't have a lot of time left, and I hate that. It was probably a fast hour for me anyways. But just to let the folks know, if they want to reach out, you've got some websites. Can you let the folks know what your website is and where they can go to get more information? Because when a global world, we can cross paths even thousands of miles away, so people can certainly get in touch with you as Dr. Joseph had from virtually anywhere in the world. So how can the folks follow you, or how can they find you and get to your website?
So you can find me, whatsinthebag.club is the program that I've launched, and there's loads of information about what I do. My podcast is on there, there's interviews, there's some testimonials from that. John@yoursmartmind.co.uk is my email for anybody that wants to engage. And because I've been on your show, Ted, anybody that wants to, or anybody that's listened to this show that wants to engage in my program, I'll be quite happily have a one-to-one conversation and knock off a little bit of a discount if they were to say John and Ted Golf.
Perfect.
John and Ted Radio Talk 2020. Or just say, in fact, we'll go for John and Ted 2020. If they put that in the email and quote that, then I'll be quite happily to engage. And you're right that the world is going to need a little bit of nurturing, and we've got to ease ourselves back in. We can't go full on crazy. We can't just rush back into things. And if we do it properly and methodically, and we do it the right way, we can all come out of this better. And we either live in two things, and that's fear and love. And if we can just keep spreading the joy and keep sharing, and we can share the love as much as we can, because fear, as you know, can just generate a lot of stress and anxiety, and we can be feared of by just what's happening. So they're the two things that we really live in, the two biggest emotions in life. And if we can just love what we do and just help people, and we can guide others and support them in the way that we can, then that's far better. We're going to be, moving in a better direction. And
I couldn't agree.
When we were talking about linguistics before, linguistics and language before, David Finn, when I interviewed him, everybody was calling it lockdown and quarantine and isolation. Them words alone make you feel anxious. And I remember ringing him up, and he says, I'm in stay-at-home mode. I was like, that's such a nice thing to say. I'm just at stay-at-home mode. So I used that one for the rest of the time. And he's such a lovely guy to speak to. And he really just settled the situation. And, yeah, so whatsinthebag.club or john@yoursmartmind.co.uk. And if I can help out with you, Ted, in any way, and do a little blog and post it out there, or whatever we can do together in collaboration, I'm up for that. It'd be good fun.
Well, I appreciate it, John. Thank you very much. And I want to give a special thank you to Jackie Arnick as well at 2 Iron Marketing for arranging this. As John mentioned earlier on, her and I met at the PJ merchandising show this past January at an after party, if you will. And she was obviously representing you, and she also represents Dave Scholes as well. And David, of course, has been on my show, and he was on here just not too long ago talking about Next Links and some of the different things that you mentioned already that he's been working on. Very, very excited for him, and so we want to say thank you to Jackie for connecting John and I. And John, it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and I hope I can convince you to come back on again sometime, and we'll continue the conversation.
Ted, you let me know anytime, and hopefully we can share the fairways at some point, either come across to Europe and Ireland, or I can come and visit the States when these borders reopen and everybody's safe. But I really, from the bottom of my heart, just thank you for giving me an hour of your time to be able to share what I'm doing with the people. And like you said, I've got Jackie, David, and Dr. Joe all talking now in the US, and I'm in Europe, so we're all collaborating to make this thing work that we want to. But thank you.
Well, I
really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. John, thank you again very much for being my special guest tonight on Coach's Corner. And again, thank you, Jackie, for helping to arrange this. And I look forward to the next time, whether it be here or whether I be there. But we'll definitely make a point of getting together. John, thank you very much. God bless, my friend, and keep doing the great work that you're doing. And again, thank you for being my special guest tonight on Golf Talk Live.
I appreciate it, Ted. Thanks. Goodbye now.
All right, go get some rest. Bye-bye. All right, that was John Taylor, performance mind coach and NLP master practitioner, and just a really great guy. You can visit his website. Again, it's what'sinthebag.club, or John at yoursmartmind.co is his email address, so you can reach out to him either of those two ways. But I want to thank the guys and that on Coach's Corner as well, Pete Buchanan, Peter Agazarian, and Jamie Leno-Zimron for joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. Thanks, guys, for doing a great job. And just a quick reminder, everybody, that June 16th, my first issue as the new owner-publisher of Golf Tips Magazine will be hitting newsstands. And I'm not going to, I've shared on social media, so I guess I can let it out. On the cover is a gentleman that I've admired and watched growing up over the years, the legendary Arnold Palmer. Of course, the image is him in his younger days, but a great article in the magazine has been written by a new friend, Peter Kessler, who I'm sure you're all familiar with. He's put together a great personal story, if you will, about the late Arnold Palmer. So newsstands, it'll be hitting Golf Tips Magazine June 16th, and obviously subscribers will be receiving their copy a little bit before that. But I'm very, very excited taking over Golf Tips Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, again, I strongly urge you, there's going to be some great issues coming up later in the year, but a great one to start with coming out here in the next few weeks. So go to golftipsmag.com. That's golftipsmag.com. And go to the subscribe page, and you can subscribe either to the print edition. It's $14.97. You get 6 issues a year. And you can also, for an extra $5, you can add on and get the digital version as well. So you can have both. You can have a copy you can hold in your hands, or if you're somebody that likes to use a Kindle or some other tablet, you can get the digital version as well for an extra $5. So go to golftipsmag.com and visit the subscribe section there and get your Golf Tips Magazine subscription today. Thanks, everybody. God bless, and I will see you next time right here on Golf Talk Live. Thanks for listening to this evening's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. Remember to tune in each week at blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. If you can't join us live, check out the on-demand section for previously aired broadcasts, or listen on any of the following social media platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, TalkStream Live, and of course, Spotify. To get updates on future shows and upcoming guests, be sure to visit the show's Facebook page, Golf Talk Live Blog. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. Remember to join me live each week for another great broadcast of Golf Talk Live. See you next time. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.